Lynn Lubas, and I'm retired from the Piscataquis County Soil and Water Conservation District, where I worked for 12 years. And then before that, it was the Riverside Florist. I worked there for 12 years, Tricia Smith. I was one of my coworkers. So, yeah, so I love everything to do with outdoors and nature. I own 18 acres with my husband in Dover, and we kind of manage the property for wildlife, for pollinators. We have perennial gardens, vegetable gardens. We've got mixed forest. We have 2 farm ponds. So that's where my interests have been. We're going to be talking a bit about pollinators and pollination and what is a pollinator. Well, what is a pollinator? Or is that what I put it first? A pollinator, yep. I'm going to go with pollination first. What is pollination? Pollination is moving the pollen from the male to the female, so the plants will reproduce to form other plants, maybe from seed, etc. So why is that important? It is important because most of our food is grown from pollination. If you didn't have the pollination, there's probably 35 to 50% of the food that we eat would not happen. So we would be really not here on the earth. It also, we pollinate for fiber, for trees, all kinds of things like that. And types of pollinators. People think of birds, bees, butterflies, but you think of birds, bees, butterflies, moths, bats, insects, flies, hummingbirds, rain, dogs, cats, you and me, wind. So there's a lot that helps with the pollination. But the key for pollination to make it successful is you want it to get to the same type of plant so that plant can continue to grow. So you may have like one plant over here that's a coreopsis, and you've got another one way over here, and you've got another one way over there. A little difficult to get to all of these. And with little pollinators like insects, which are the biggest pollinators, the best ones, they get tired. So you want to, when you plant, you're going to want to try to plant closer together in big clusters and all that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'm a little nervous. So we got types of, and let me talk a little bit about some of the pollinators. The butterflies. Most people think right away about monarchs, and monarchs are a good pollinator, but they're also a specialized pollinator. And what I mean by that is they use one plant to eat and to pollinate and to, well, the chrysalis, they will land on other plants for that. So it's important when you do have, like I said, plantings that you want to do closer together so these little creatures can do their job. The caterpillars will shelter under the layer of leaf litter and inside seed pods and hollow stems. And if you know with milkweed, it's kind of a hollow stem, and so they will stay there. And so it's important not to cut some of these things down to leave your gardens messy. Yes.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So I have read that you should not rake off your flower beds until it gets warmer. I mean, this is plenty warm now, right?
Right, yeah.
Even like 2 weeks ago, or 2 weeks?
Yeah, well, again, it depends on how,
Yeah.
we got a lot of rain and cooler weather, so they are finding that if you do keep your messy gardens, especially for winter, it will help the pollinators, and I'll explain a little bit more later on that, because I'm finding out this too. But birds, leave your dried flower heads. A lot of people like to cut everything down and make it nice and neat and all that. You can probably cut the iris leaves, because I think those can cause a problem. But most of the stuff, like your echinacea, any of your black-eyed Susans, anything like that, leave up there. They have seeds in there, and you'll find the birds come and eat the seeds, which help them in winter. And of course, winter they have less food, so they're going to need more. But they're also great pollinators because they go from flower to flower, and when they do, their feathers, get all covered with pollen, and off they go. We also think about the hummingbirds, and those are another one. They like tubular flowers. The feeders are great. 4 parts water to 1 part sugar, no honey. You don't have to boil it, it would be good. But those are another pollinator that is in gardens a lot. There are bees, and you think of bumblebees and you think of honeybees, but there are so many other bees. I'm going to list them, and it's crazy. I've never heard of some of these. cuckoo bees, masked bees, Carter bees, polyester bees. Those are called polyester because when they drill, they're ground nesters. They make almost like a cellophane coating in their little tunnel, and then they can lay their eggs in there. Large carpenter bees, small carpenter bees, horn bees, sweat bees, mason bees, miner bees, digger bees, and squash bees. Now, squash bees is another specialized squash. That's their main place that they'll go. They like to they'll pollinate. You'll find them sometimes sleeping in the flower. They'll just stay there and they get tired, so they just go up and lay in the sun, and then they'll move on. And again, the pollen is going with them. So, talking about creating areas for these bees, a lot of the native bees are ground nesters. And so you'll see sometimes if you have a walkway and you put sand in between your pavers or something, and you'll be like, what the heck are all these little holes? Well, it could be a bee that has gone in there, and then they just kind of go in there and they nest and they lay their egg and all that. The other day I was telling Kim, I was on my knees weeding my garden path, and I pulled up a weed and I saw this little bee drop, and I thought, oh, that's a honeybee. No, it's not. And she went right into the hole. And then I watched, and I see this mound of dirt coming up. And then next thing you know, it was covered. So if I hadn't been on my hands and knees, I would never have seen it. But she was going in there, and she'll lay an egg, and it'll produce babies later on. So it's important to have areas that don't have any foliage or greenery or grass or anything for these native bees, because they are incredible pollinators also. They say that you should let's say at the edges of your property or your lawns, try to keep some area that is a little dirt and exposed like that, again, because there's so many of them and they do so much good for us, but they need that open, sunny area so they can drill in, make their nest, but they winter over in there too, but they lay their eggs in there as well. And they say sometimes they use old rodent holes or snake holes, and sometimes some of the creatures will nest in the same holes at the same time as the creature that created it. And there's not that many that actually I think the carpenter bee might be the only one that actually makes their own nest. So again, that's why it's important to leave some of this stuff we consider rotting, old dead trees and things like that, because it's a lot of creatures that live in there. Let's see, it says wood nesting bees are found in pithy twigs or vine centers. So that again would be anything that's like a weed or the sunflower seeds and all that. They will actually drill in there and they will nest in there for the winter and winter over. Again, another reason not to cut all the plants down for that. It says, let's see, I'm getting nervous again. So bumblebees, we see them all the time, but they are also having a little trouble with surviving because there are some habitat loss is huge. That takes care of eradicating some of these these insects. Insecticides are huge. We don't realize we may not be using it, but some farmer next door or even the product that you buy, there are some plants that and seeds that are coated with something called neonicotinoid. It's a neocide, and it's to keep the seed from rotting, but it also is water soluble, so when you plant that seed and it grows, the plant, the leaves, the flower, everything has that pesticide in it. So then you've got a bird or an insect that comes, and that will get into their system. So we don't realize that. So a lot of the big box places are saying that they are not going to be selling them, but it's good to ask in case. I think Home Depot was one that was supposed to be mostly not using those anymore, but it's important not to use anything like that. Anything with a side means it's going to kill something, and you don't realize. So let's say your plant gets it, and you've got your bee that comes and it's now infected because it's been trying to pollinate. Then you get a bird that's going to come and eat that little pollinator, and so it just goes on and on and on. So then that little bird gets caught by a hawk, and then we don't realize even the tiniest little things really have something to do with all of the other species that we have here. with native mason bees and leaf cutters, we can help them by making little nest boxes, because they don't drill in. So I've got some plans here for them. But there's a, hand these out. And this is another one. But you can drill holes in like a log or in a little block of wood. You can build a little tiny house and use, one good way to use an invasive Japanese knotweed when they're dry. You've got the end on the back, and then the top is open. You can stack those in a little house, and you can put them together, and that can be a bee house. And the mason bees will come, and they'll put some food in there, pollen, nectar, and then they'll lay their egg in there. And then you'll see, you've probably noticed in, let's say if you have an old hose or something, that the ends are stuffed with dirt, and you're wondering what the heck? Well, that's packed it in. It's got the egg in there, it's got the larva, it's got the food, and then it closes it up for the spring. But these are some easy ways to use up. Scrap wood is excellent for this. And so you've got the leaf cutter. The leaf cutter is a similar bee that needs to be have holes also. And those are both solitary bees. They're not in hives, and they're not in congregation or colonies. And they will actually take some of the leaves. They'll eat a little bit on your gardens, and you'll think, why do my plants have little holes in them? Well, the little leaf cutter is just taking that, chewing it up, and then they will cover the hole with a little leaf thing. So when their larva does winter over and comes out, they can eat the food and they can pop their way out. They just get through the mud, or they eat through the leaves to get them out. So, let's talk about bats. Bats, they're nighttime pollinators, and but not all bats eat insects. Most of them do, but they're nectar-feeding bats. And some of the scientists have realized that some of the plants have evolved just to attract the bats. It may have like a putrid, gross smell, and that will pull it in, or a very fragrant smell. You don't know, because we think they're all going to be just by echolocation. Some of them find it by that, some find it by scent. So it doesn't have to be like a tubular plant necessarily, but they will, the good thing about bats is they get into the plants, and their whole bodies are fuzzy, so they will carry more pollen to the plants, between the plants, and they also can go longer distances than bees and insects can, so they're beneficial in that respect. Let's see. So they say if you don't have bats, you don't have tequila. I don't know if anybody's a drinker here, but the agave plant relies solely on the bats to pollinate and reproduce. But the bats also serve as plants that we use for medicinal, cultural, and economic purposes, and also fiber, fruits, trees like that. So when you're thinking of plants, again, you think of flowering plants, but it's shrubs, and it's ornamental grasses, it's trees, all of those that are really beneficial and need pollination. You can do a night garden. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, where you do mostly light colored or white plants, and like there's trumpet lilies and there's phlox and stuff like that, but that will pull in some of the pollinators also, although they don't all go for just the light colored plants, but that'll pull them in. And it's also pretty neat to see at night when you look out in your garden and you can see all the lightness of the flowers there, especially on full moons. Maine has 8 species of bats. There's the northern long-eared bat and the little brown bat. And there's some restrictions on foresters being able to cut trees in the beginning of spring, because I forget the dimension, it's 4 or 6 inches. They can't cut anything larger than that, because for like 2 months, because that's when they're nesting in the trees, and the long-eared bats need that time to get their babies fledged and all that, and that's one way that they're helping them. But we have northern long-eared bats, little brown bats, big bats, eastern small-footed bats, tricolored bats, and hibernating bats. They're all hibernating bats, meaning they have to find places to stay through the winter. And there's only 2 or 3, I think 3 places of known caves in Maine for these bats to hibernate. And if you find a cave, please don't disturb it in the fall, late fall, because October to May is when they hibernate, and if they get disturbed, they use a lot of their energy up, and they've got the little tiny bodies. They need cooler temperatures, and they need it to be humid in those places, so they don't wither and die. They will dehydrate otherwise than that. So it's important for them to do that, because those bats are all colony type bats. They'll stay together. And the problem with some of the bats that we're finding also is there's the white nose syndrome, which is decimating it. But again, please try not to disturb them. But we do have silver-haired eastern red bats and hoary bats that are tree bats, and they don't hibernate the same way. They will stay in trees. They will nest in trees. They will get under the bark in trees, and those are again beneficial because they have more hair on their body and they can transfer the pollination a little better. You can do bat houses. I've seen where they say it should be multiple baffles on the bat houses because, again, it'll give more heat and the bats will survive better. Others say, no, you can just put it on a house side and that will be plenty. They're still up in the air on which bat does better which way, but anything that you can offer them for a spot to stay would be a good thing. Let's see. And again, standing dead, this goes with trees again. If you keep the standing dead, they call them snags in your woods. People think, oh, that's ugly. But you've got most of these bees, the bats, you've got birds, you have insects, you have raccoons. I was cross-country skiing and I looked over at a tree that was dead and up comes a raccoon peeking out of it. He was nesting in there. So it's good for all of these creatures. And again, most of these creatures are pollinators, which is what we're interested in. So honeybees. This is a non-native versus native. We like to say use as many native as you can, but some of the non-native things are not necessarily bad. Everybody loves to look at drifts of lupin. They're not native to Maine, but they're beautiful, and pollinators do use them. And honeybees are European, so they are not native, but they are a big producer, help produce plants that will give us food. And there are 3 types of bees in the honeybees. They're a social group. They live in hives. There's the queen. She's the female, and her sole purpose is to lay eggs. She can lay up to 2,000 to 2,500 eggs a day. And she is tended to by workers who are also females, and they feed her nothing but royal jelly, and that keeps her a queen, a fertilized queen. She will mate in the spring with a drone, which is the only male, and they're a little bit larger and bigger, and that's their purpose, to mate with the queen. And then she will go back into the hive, and she will walk over the whole hive, and that will spread her pheromones, and then she will start laying. And they will tend to her, they will feed her, they will make sure she has water, they will clean out any of the cells that babies just came out of. They will pack everything in there. So after she has done her job, and they will then, the little worker bees will come behind her and they'll put pollen and nectar in the hive for the little eggs, and they will cap it. The larva will form. And then when the larva is done, it will get out and she will be a queen, and she will be a female, and she will start her working. But the workers, when they first come out, they stay in the hive, and they will be, they've got many different jobs. They'll clean the cells. So somebody's come out of a cell, so there's little scraps of the wax that was on the top of the cell. So they'll clean that and they'll take it out. They're very fastidious. Honeybees like it really clean in their home. So they'll take all that away. They'll clean if there's any other refuse out there. They'll take that out of there, and then they will start to put in, if they need, they'll need to put some of the nectar in there because they're going to produce honey, so that'll carry them through the winter. And they'll put pollen in there, which is also food. Again, for the winter, you'll see multicolors of pollen. When I started, I was panicked because I thought it was all just white or yellow. Mm-hmm. I found brown, I found red, I found green, I found orange, and I thought, oh my goodness, what diseases come into my hive? So I called my mentor, and she's like, it's okay, Lynn, every plant has a different color of pollen. I was like, okay, all right. So they're working on that. They also, if you use foundation that's not drawn out means it's got wax that made these little holes that are, it sits out quite a bit from the foundation, and that's where they can actually put the eggs. So the bees need to do that first. So it's nice to get that done quickly, so you want to feed them sugar water in the spring just to get them working on that, because there's not that much nectar or pollen for them to work with. But once they fill that out, then she can go to town and do it. You'll see them, you've got field bees and you've got the hive bees, and the hive bees will also help cool the hive. Sometimes you'll see down by the opening, you'll see a bunch of them facing out, and you think, what the heck? And they're batting their wings, they're causing a current, and that will help cool it. The field bees will bring in pollen, they'll bring in nectar, the hive bees will take that and they'll put it where they need to, be it feeding the queen or not. They have to bring in water, and that will help cool down the hive. And they'll keep the hive in the 90s, I think about 94, through the summer, through the winter. And I used to get nervous that, is it too hot? Well, somehow they can keep that all acclimated. In the middle of a stone cold winter, they'll keep that hive in the 90s, or the queen will die. The field bees will go out and get the pollen, the nectar. Propolis is something from the trees. It's a bark tree. Some people think it's just for gluing holes in your hive to keep it all airtight. But they said there were other properties in there. I think it's antimicrobial properties too. But that's something to look into. And then drones, like I said, are the males, and their main purpose is to mate with the queen. So they're great in the spring and the summer, and they get fed, and then out in the fall, they're gone. So if you get nervous, if you're seeing all these dead bees and they're big bees, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's one of these, my queen, it's probably the guys. They're like, you've done your job, time to move on. So then they want to keep that food for the worker bees and the queen bees. And the workers last about between 4 and 6 weeks, so they have a lot of work to do in that short amount of time. There's some scout bees that go out, and they will come back to the hive, and they'll do a little waggle dance. And the waggle dance will tell them what type of, is it pollen, is it nectar, but it also kind of gives the direction. So there's different dances that they do. And then, you got a honeybee there.
This book, so May Reed's ad here was the honeybee.
That was the one.
And it is the perfect book to learn about the whole life. It starts from her coming out of her cell to her at age 36 dying. And it's really, really, really good. And I've been reading it all this stuff.
That's good. Awesome. Yeah. And there's another one here, First Lessons in Beekeeping. Just a little more technical, but it'll give you an idea. And I had read a bunch of, suddenly all these articles started coming about 10, 12 years ago. And it was like, honeybees do this, honeybees do that. So that's how I got interested, and then I started keeping them, and I joined a club. Again, the average lifespan is like 4 to 5 weeks, and then they're done. And that's why it's important to keep the eggs producing and hatching and all this. And the queen will last 3 to 5 years if you're really lucky. And the winter bees, though, you want to make sure there's plenty of honey in there and pollen and all that, because they are going to last through the winter. They have to do their job, and they cluster around the queen. And again, they're trying to keep her warm through the whole winter. And so it's kind of like, have you seen the penguins, where they show the penguins and they're all clustered, and then you'll see some of them work their way out and others work their way in. It's the same way with the bees. They'll stay clustered, and they usually move, to the honey, and then they'll slowly work their way up, and again, keep moving like that. And so they kind of disjoint. It's almost like they're disjointing their wings, but they'll keep moving their shoulders, so to speak. I mean, just keep the body motion, and it'll keep it warm. And then some will move out, some will move in, and they'll last through the winter for several months, which is different. There is something called colony collapse disorder, which was really big in the news for many, many years. And that neonicotinoid, that is a huge thing they think is bothering the bees, because again, it's through the whole plant. So when they take the nectar and the pollen in, they take it to the hive, and it is toxic to bees. It's also toxic to birds, and so it's again that food chain, and it works its way right through it. There is a study that was going on at University of Maine where they had these little cages. They were called pollen cages, and they put it in the entrance to several hives. And so when the bees would come in, some of the pollen would be knocked off and left in a little tiny container underneath, and they would analyze them, and it was amazing. They said the different types of sides that were in there, pesticides and all that, herbicides, and just different things, because pesticides for pets, herbs for plants and weeds and things like that. So again, you think you're doing everything right, but those around you, the land around you, because bees can fly if they have to, up to 5 miles away. So that's a long way. So if you're in the middle of some place and you think, oh, I've got it made, well, maybe not. If you have somebody down the road that's planting something that's not right, so that'll do it. Another thing that's concerning with the bees is something called a varroa mite, and it's very prevalent now, and you can treat them with some different things that aren't too bad. There's different ways. There's a fogging, and there's I forgot to write it down, something else. But you can treat it, and it's not so toxic. It's very natural, so that's good. But the varroa mites will, when they lay the egg and the larva starts to form, the varroa mite will get into the cell with the larva attached to the larva. The larva will get capped, and they eat all the time. So when the mostly female bees get hatched, you'll see sometimes the smaller bodies. You'll see wings that are not quite formed properly, and you'll see either up at the neck here and here these brilliant kind of shiny burgundy, or even here on the bodies you'll see these circles on them. What the heck is that? It's a varroa mite that's eating away at it, and now they're bringing in disease. They're not only parasitizing the larva and damaging the bees, they're also bringing in diseases that are not good. So that's another problem with it. So it is important to try to treat them. There's other ways people try to do naturally by doing with powdered sugar, and they say that it'll cover them and it'll knock the mites off. There's a lot of different thoughts on it, and some work and some don't. But again, pesticides are a huge thing, and then now this varroa mites. You can do everything right, and your bees will die. You can do everything wrong, and your bees will live. So it depends. The basic thing is you want to make sure that they have plenty of the honey and pollen and all that going into the winter. And we usually have like two supers are, no, I beg your pardon, 2 brood boxes. Those are the boxes that the eggs get laid in, and the honey gets put in, and then you put a super, which is just super is called because that's where your honey is. So it's kind of super. You get honey out of it. So that's at the top. If your hive is producing a lot of honey and you've got a lot of the stores there and it's August, and you think, okay, I think I've got enough for the winter, take some of the honey off the supers. I tended to err on the cautious side, and I didn't always take that much honey because I wanted to make sure the girls would make it through the winter. So that again, some people harvest. They have a fantastic. There's one woman I know. She would harvest 7 supers on like 3 hives. It's like I never was fortunate to have that. Again, it's nature. You never know with nature what's going to happen. So that's honeybees. Anybody have any questions? You can ask me. Go ahead.
Does the pesticides and all that stuff get into the honey?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know on that. Excuse me. I would think so, but maybe with humans it wouldn't be quite as bad. I didn't think to look that question up.
No, I just always thought honey was pure, and from what you're saying, I'm not sure of this.
Well, the bees are what get affected, so it depends on if the pollen, if the nectar came from plants with that. I'll have to do some research on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. Anybody interested in keeping bees? You are. Well, there is a group that meets, as I get out of the picture here. Excuse me. It's called the Panquist Beekeepers, and they meet over in Dexter, the second Tuesday usually of the month. I'll just hand these out in case anybody is interested or knows somebody that's interested. This is just some information about them. They're a good group of people. There's from beginners up to 50-year beekeepers. They love to have new people come and ask questions. In the summer, we have what they call open hives, and you get to go to a place and they will actually open the hive up and they'll check it for mites. They'll see if the queen is producing. They will see if the patterns are good, because if they lose a queen, excuse me, a worker bee who is again female but she's sterile, she will start laying eggs and they'll capping them. But they'll be, when the queen lays her eggs, it's a really nice pattern. It'll be like areas like this, and she'll kind of grow out. When a non-fertilized female, well, she'll have some over here, she'll have some over here, down here, down here. It's all willy-nilly. So that's a good way to know if you lost your queen too. It's like, why is this happening? But so with these open hives, we do it in July and June, and you can go and you can see and ask questions. You can say, oh, this isn't interesting to me, this is interesting to me, it's something I don't care about, whatever. But, and we actually are starting a new hive. It's the community garden in Dexter at the Sherburne farm. They're putting one up there, so if you go by, you'll be able to see them. So, but they're a good resource too, and they have a Facebook page and all of that. So, go ahead.
The Penquist Beekeepers have a Facebook page?
Yes, yeah, they do. And then I think I have their website, yeah, and there's a lot of information there too, just asking questions. And so that is good. Again, like I said, they're really great. They love to bring people in. So, native versus non-native. Native being indigenous to the area, meaning the plants and the animals and the pollinators all work well together. When you bring in, excuse me, non-native, again, honeybees are non-native, lupin is non-native, but they've climatized or adjusted here. But if you bring in a non-native, non-natives don't necessarily have controls on them. And then you get into like invasives. You bring something over from Asia, like the Eurasian Eastern longhorn beetle and all that. Eurasian longhorn, I can't even talk. Beetle. They don't have any predators. They don't have any controls to keep them in check. When you get into the non-natives and they become invasive, that means they're going to outcompete your natives. They're going to some of them actually change the soil. So your regular plants won't be able to grow. You will have they'll overtake, like loosestrife, you see that everywhere on the side of the road. That will overtake wetlands and that will choke them out, and so your natives won't be able to grow. And again, affecting pollinators, because a lot of these places that they're affecting are on plants and flowers. So some of the non-natives you see a lot of are purple loosestrife, Japanese knotweed, Oriental bittersweet, which everybody loves, these pretty berried wreaths. You can get an American bittersweet. It's not as invasive, so even if you're near the bittersweet and you're out in a field, I see there's a lot down at the Browns Mill. Be careful with your feet, because if you step on them and their seeds get on them and you go home, now it's on your property. You don't think about that, but it does happen. There's honeysuckles. If you look at this time of year and you go up down the road, I see when I go up Bear Hill, you'll see beautiful shrubs about 3 to 5 feet tall, and they're all green right now. You're like, wow, look at that stuff go. Well, that's an invasive honeysuckle. It's blooms early. It's got an incredible amount of beautiful berries that the birds love, but then the birds poop them everywhere and it spreads. And then late in the fall, you look at those same plants and they're still going to be green. So their season is longer. So they're out competing the native plants for nutrition, and also the pollinators and all that. They'll be going to those plants instead of your plants. But they will actually take over areas, and we will then lose some of our native plants. And barberry is another one people grow, and burning bush. Everybody loves that beautiful red bush in the foliage. We'll grow blueberries. You'll get a beautiful white blossom in the beginning of spring, you'll see fruit, and then in the fall it gets a beautiful rosy color. There's bayberry, which is native, you can use, or bearberry instead of the barberry, which has got, again, that will overtake the areas that the natives grow. Invasives are aggressive. They can change the chemical compound of the soil. They outcompete for nutrition and water in the soil, and they easily spread. So it's hard because they don't have the controls that they had in their native lands. And I've got some more handouts that will help you a little bit. The plants, there are so many plants. This is some of what I just said. There's so many plants and for pollinators. They're not all, you've got some that are like umbral, that means they're kind of rounded. Those are good like landing spots for pollinators, because some of the pollinators hover and they just use their proboscis, and so they'll tubular flowers are good for them. But like the cone flower and all that, that's good. So it's good to have a variety. I guess what I'm saying is a variety of plants in your garden or on your properties. Remember to include trees, flowering shrubs, grasses that are ornamentals, because that again, there's a source of pollen there. And if you try to get from spring until fall, is awesome. People hate dandelions. My yard is full of them, because the honeybees, that's one of the first plants that they can go to. Then they go to the violets, and then they move on from there. But weeds or wildflowers are awesome, because that's, again, natural here, and that's what the native pollinators like. There's a tall, white, wispy-looking plant you see on the side of the roads, and everybody says, what the heck is this? Well, that's a tall white clover. Again, excellent for pollinators. And there's a lot of time that the pollinators don't have the flowers that they need to keep producing, because they use a lot of energy moving from place to place and trying to pollinate. And so it's important to try to get as many plants through all the seasons that you can in your garden for that purpose. And it's not always necessarily color. Sometimes it is color that matters, and sometimes it is not. But again, huge drifts meaning a big grouping of flowers is a good thing to have in your gardens, and multi-season. And I have some photos of my gardens that show you a little bit. Herbs are wonderful. I have thyme, mint, lavender, oregano, and I let them grow and go to flower, and they are loaded with all kinds of bees and butterflies and things. But I've incorporated a lot of different shapes and sizes and flowers, and you need to have, for pollinators, you also need to have cover. There's food, water, cover, and space, because every creature has a certain amount of area that they need to live in, but you need cover for protection, you need cover for nesting. I have a plant in one of these, you'll see near one of the arbors, a big tree with a serviceberry, and I watched a hawk come down, and a songbird went into that plant, and the hawk was jumping around that plant, and he was throwing his chest against it, and he was trying to scare that songbird out of it, and it was so thick that he couldn't do it. He hopped around that whole thing for about 5 minutes, and then he took off. So it's good for protection in that respect. I've got like low-growing juniper, and the birds will go underneath there. We have a broad-tailed hawk living on the property. You hear the call, and then you see them go underneath all of these thick things. So sometimes this messiness and this wild-looking stuff is good. I've got fruit, cranberries and blueberries in my garden. I have perennials. I have herbs. I have flowering, fragrant plants. I've got the water, the garden, the water pond, and I have the bird bath in there. So all these little things are great to help the pollinators along. And my husband was kind of getting mad because it was this little 4x4, and then it was about 8x10, and now it's quite a large garden. But again, trying to get the seasons plants for all the seasons is huge. They call it a dearth. When you get into the end of summer, there's not enough stuff for them to eat. That's why the goldenrod, which some people call, they say, oh, my allergies, it's usually not that, but goldenrod is awesome. The aster, New England aster, that's another late season one. The Rudbeckia and the black-eyed Susans, those are all really wonderful for the late season pollinators. All the bees, the birds, all of them. I think I've come to the end of my chatting. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
So right now I have violets and dandelions.
Yes.
And some cultivated things. I want to put some wildflowers, and I'm wondering if you have a recommendation. I mean, I started to pick up seed packets. Like you
Those are
recommend.
great. Yeah, yes, those are great. I think one of our lists has some wildflowers on it. At the beginning, I did some, let's see. And actually on the back, there's also a, let's see. It's the first package that, you might not have received it because you
Yeah,
came in
yeah.
later. All right. That's fabulous. Yeah, let's get that. Yeah. Because it gives, whoops, there's, oh, I haven't handed this, either, yeah. But, if you see stuff growing around the area, I mean, that's a huge thing. Yeah. And then this is just more, but, the asters are great. Asters, goldenrod, my whole pond down, I've got a third of an acre pond, and that was loaded with goldenrod last year. It's beautiful. Some people say, oh, that's ugly, but it was loaded with pollinators. It really was. I mean, you even see the birds in there. But you got the butterfly bush or milkweed, and people, again, some people, if you've got farms, people don't like that on their farms because it just spreads quickly, it's aggressive. I have this from the University of Maine that I just got last night at a thing, and they suggest anise hyssop, butterfly milkweed, borage, which is an herb, meadowsweet, which you see a lot on the sides of the roads. It's kind of feathery looking. Sometimes it's pink. It's also called, I think it's something similar. It's called steeplebush, Greek oregano, but asters and coneflower and summersweet. There are a lot. But if you go on the back of one of those lists that have the local suppliers, I've got websites for like the USDA and all these places. They can give you more information, more localized also. And these greenhouses can also help you with what would grow.
You can also, for native stuff, especially the cooperative extension office.
Yeah, that's huge. A lot of this
Yeah.
information came from them.
Lori over there really does a good job of, she does like a pollinator-friendly garden certification class now.
Okay,
So
good.
she does a lot of really, and Soil and Water District too has some
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah, so those are some good things. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you said butterfly bush, you don't mean the actual butterfly bush, which won't work here, do you?
No, the Asclepias tuberosa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an orangey looking
Yeah.
one, because there's another one that's not so good here, but it's, and then there's a swamp milkweed also that grows in Maine. That's a native. There's also a lot of, these are mostly in the wetland area. Oh shoot, I just lost it. It's in the rhododendron family. Not coming to me. It's not coming to me, but yeah, again, the University of Maine has a lot of references of natives and plants and stuff.
I had 3 little butterfly weed one year. I had 4 minor caterpillars on them.
Wow.
They stripped it. They didn't survive.
Oh, it didn't survive, but did the
But as I saw
caterpillars?
them, I just tried moving them over to the
Yeah,
milkweed. Okay, go over there where you belong.
yeah. And they may put their chrysalis on another plant. It may not be on the milkweed. So again, that's another reason to check before you cut things down, because if you look underneath, I mean, the chrysalis is maybe that big, so you may not see it. I was checking by the marsh down on where I live, and I happened to be looking down like this, and it's like, oh, there's something hanging there, and there was a chrysalis. Unfortunately, it was October, so it didn't make it. But So if you become a little more observant, you'll see a lot more things that are in your area that you don't realize. And if you don't have a big area, you can still have a window box, hanging plants, 4x4 area. It doesn't have to be huge areas. And there's a lot you can put in those. And if you do, like I said, herbs and even your vegetables, you get a benefit because you get to eat them, but you're helping them at the same time. And you can mix vegetables and perennials and things like that, fruits all in the same garden. So, and I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep. No. Any other questions? A lot of handouts. I didn't have a PowerPoint, which is always a little easier when you've got colors, but thank you for coming. Yes.
It's a silly question, but
No,
we were
question is
talking
silly.
about the hummingbird, liquid. What are the parts again?
It's 4 parts water, 1 cup of sugar. 4 cups of sugar, 4 cups to 1 cup. Don't do honey. Don't do color. Do not add color. They don't need it. Even
Now,
if you're
I
hummingbird
boil
feeder.
the water, and
You don't have
you don't have
to.
to.
That's the thing. I just use hot water and then I stir it up, and as long as it's melted in there,
Now,
dissolved, it'll
I
be
have
fine.
one hummingbird feeder that is just glass, and it has a silver aluminum bottom, and I've never had any hummingbirds come to it.
Really?
So I got one that's red.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping it'll make.
Sure, I guess we get them in just 2 doors down. And I do suggest if you get hummingbird feeders, they're beautiful ones, but if they've got a hole this big, how are you gonna clean it? You try to get in there, you can't. If it's got a hole that big, I had one plastic one and it actually biodegraded. I had it for like 15 years. But it was the easiest thing to clean because you wanna make sure that it doesn't get too smoky. A week and a half, start to change them if they haven't consumed it all. Because if it gets smoky, then you're getting disease in there, and you don't want that to happen. And then around the ports, you'll see with the hummingbirds, you want to make sure, that those are all clean too. And a lot of them, the little fake flowers will pop off, so you can get a small brush, a bar brush, and clean them out.
Are
But
the
again,
hummingbirds here yet?
somebody in Charleston told me they had some the other day, and Dexter had them, so they should be here soon.
Somebody said last year that we got one on the 16th of May.
There's some people who have it down to a science. I am not good.
Yeah.
I put it on the calendar, but I am not good with that.
And then with the bee, drilling holes into wood for the bees, could you use like trunks, tree trunks?
You
from-
can. Yeah, I would think that anything that's a hole, like I said, they usually are opportunistic. They will use existing holes. And again, I can't say enough about the bark and the old trees and everything, because when the trees start to die and the bark pulls away, bats get up under there. You've got insects in there, but the birds are gonna come. And then when the tree finally falls down, it biodegrades, and there's insects in there that are breaking it down, and it's a huge cycle, and it's really fascinating when you think of how interconnected everything is in life. You don't think.
But you shouldn't use pressure treated though.
No pressure treated, no. I did see on one of them, this person actually, I don't know, I would not, personally, I wouldn't think foam would be a good thing, because sometimes the foams are not, will make the petroleum stuff. So I would stick with woods that you can, or like I said, leaves. That's a good way to use an invasive, positively. Once they're dry, then you can cut them, and they are sectioned, they're segmented, so you cut one side that's got an opening and leave the other side that's not. If they're all tubed, then you just put a back on it, because you want it one-sided. You want them to be able to just tap the one side. They suggest drilling in about 5 inches, and I forget the dimension, it depends. So it's kind of like bluebirds' houses. They want 1.5-inch holes. So many birds use those. If it's a little bigger, you've got too many other birds moving in there, so, but the birds adjust. Insects adjust. They don't, if I can't fit my shoulders in there, I'm not going in there. But again, the area on the ground is great. Even sometimes I notice near my edges of my yards, I get clumpy, kind of coarse grass and stuff. That again is another place for little insects to nest and get out. I mean, we like it pristine. We like it all uniform. We like monoculture. Nature is messy. I mean, you start looking at things. Nothing is symmetrical in nature, but it's all beautiful. So we can help in that way.
So, I read how you see and talk about But that stock is used for like all, like the hummingbirds like red and
And other colors, yeah.
But do we know, like, have you ever heard this, that they see an ultraviolet?
There was an article that I read about that, but it didn't unfortunately stick in my head, so I'm not sure.
Because it talked about just honeybees
Yeah,
in the book that I read, and I wondered if all bees, or if it was just honeybees.
I'm not sure. Because they were saying that, hummingbirds like tubular, and they like sometimes that they're hanging down because then the insects won't necessarily go in it, but they'll go to other flowers too. I mean, I had you heard of a sphinx moth, a hummingbird moth?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it almost looks like Groucho Marx with these big eyebrows. Well, they hit every panicle on my phlox. I was going through my arbor, and it was like, I thought, oh, bee. And then I looked, and it's like, no, it hit every little panicle. And I thought, I just stood there for 5 minutes, and then went to the next one, and hit every little flower thing. So they adapt, they know what they need. And honeybees have a smaller proboscis, so they can't fit into, they like the white clover, the small white clover, but the red clover is a little too long. They can't necessarily get their proboscis down there to get the nectar from it. So, again, bumblebees, they're indiscriminate. They go on everything, and they're fun. So, yeah, everything knows what they need. So,
Yes. Something about hawks. Is there a way that I kind of discourage them a little? We've had one that seems to be hanging around our backyard, and I wondered, because we love having all the birds and stuff. So the other birds, I don't know if there's a way to, is it just not, we'd have to take the suet in or the bird food or all that? Or?
I think so. In that respect, you might have something nesting, and if so, they're just going to be. If you have any old growth, a lot of the hawks like the old growth evergreens and stuff, go in the notches. And we had one over there, and this has been 6 years. We keep having it back, and now we're seeing 2 of them. So we're thinking that's what it is. I did see one time, I was watching the birds, and suddenly everything disappeared except for one. It's a hairy woodpecker. He was on the arbor, but I'm looking at him like he's not moving.
That's what happens.
And I looked up, and there on the top of a maple over here was the hawk. Everything left, and the hairy woodpecker was right here. And slowly, I watched him. Slowly, he scooched around there, and then he put his head back. And I didn't know that he was moving until I saw that it moved. And it was about 10, 20 minutes later, he was gone, and the hawk was gone. But so I think if you have cover, that's huge. And again, like I said, it's beneficial for the pollinators also. But it will protect them because they went down and some of them went off. So they're underneath the thick stuff that's there. Even your lilies have a nice thick canopy there. So that's a good thing. So thank you. But I don't know about, some people use owls, statuary. Some use whirligigs. I don't know if that may keep them from, maybe if it's near your bird feeder, but I don't know if that would keep your bird feeder, from being active also. That's the thing. I'm not sure what would actually do it. I know it's not
more often, but we also do have bugle ponds that they kind of can go and under and kind of do that. So.
Yeah, it's huge. It's big.
Yeah.
The protection.
If you have a hawk nest right in your area, be very, very careful. They will attack. I was hiking in Connecticut doing 400 miles of Connecticut years ago, and I came across a guy. We were talking for an opposite direction. And he said, there isn't a hawk nest up above. He said, be careful. There was a guy going through the day before on a bicycle with a helmet. Even though the hawk kept dive bombing him, until the hawk sunk his talons in the guy's neck.
Oh my God.
In my old barn, we had to be careful. Don't go up the hill because the hawks are nesting. They will attack.
I suppose if the babies are there, they're protected. Yeah, that's a mama's instinct, right?
Head the paradigm itself or the mountain the best.
Yeah.
Because they will leave their nest and never come back.
Oh wow.
And so babies can die. So you can't hike the mountain when they're nesting. It's usually from it's like April to end of July. You can't hike that mountain.
Wow. Wow. Okay, well that's all I've got.
Yeah, and there's talk about or just people.
Yeah, if you want to look, these are some magazines and books. stuff I've collected and stuff the library has, and I really enjoyed this one, and you might be able to get a past edition. It's Ultimate Perennials, but it's got plants for hummingbirds and butterflies in it. But it'll explain blanket flower, tell you all about it. What it looks like is great, what it grows, and it's from the Garden Gate, which is a good.
That one came out last year, didn't it?
This one actually is from 2015.
Oh.
This was a long time ago. They do repeat. This was good for me with Grit. It was helped me with the honeybees when I was getting into it. And this one, First Lessons in Beekeeping, is easy to read. There's a lot more in there than I could take in, but it gives you step by step. You know, how do you do this? What kind of gear do you need? When I started, it was about $300 to get your hives, your bees, your uniform, and everything. I can't imagine what it is now. But you can get boxes that you put together yourself, which it costs a lot less. And again, there's a lot of resources for that. So if you want to look at any of these, be my guest. And this will give you a little bit more, some ideas on different plants also. And this one also has gardening for any pollinators also. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.